All right, everybody, we are about to start up again, so please take your seats. Now, this is going to be the time where it's kind of a choose-your-own adventure. We're going to have two simultaneous breakout sessions that are going to happen at the same time. For those who are interested in port security, it's going to happen right here in this main ballroom, but if you're interested in critical minerals, it's going to be in the East Ballroom over there, all right? So again, port security here in this main ballroom and critical minerals in the East Ballroom, all right? Now I'd like to officially start the port security breakout session led by Dr. Ryan Berg, Director of the Latin America Center at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Gentlemen.
Thank you, sir. Okay.
Okay, welcome back everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this session on port security. I'm quite upset I'll have to take up my concerns with Leland later that we're competing with critical minerals, also a great topic. But we're going to try our best to have a riveting session here, get you out of your food coma, and talk about port security. We've got a great panel here to help us cover the topic and covering a really wide range of issues in the region and a number of different geographies. So I'm just going to give you a quick biographical sketch of the gentleman up here on the stage, and then we'll launch into some questions here. Immediately to my left is Fred Wong. He's the Deputy Port Director at Port Miami. To his left is Alexandre Mule, who's Head of Security for CMA CGM. To his left is Lieutenant Colonel Kirk Johnson, who's the Vice President for Security and Safety at the Port Authority of Jamaica. And then to my far left is Mr. Azim Ali, who's the Security Superintendent to the Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. Now, the session today will feature about 20-25 minutes of comments from the panel, and then we want a robust discussion from the audience. So we've got 3 microphones here. Please get your questions ready because there will be ample time to ask those questions. So I thought I would kick off the discussion with a couple pointed questions for each of the gentlemen up here on the stage, and then we'll get into specific issues. So let's start with Mr. Ali and Lieutenant Colonel Johnson. When you're looking at the regional landscape here when it comes to ports, in your opinion, what are the key threats? Give us that kind of really macro level analysis to kick us off. Let's start with you, Mr. Ali, and then we'll go to Lieutenant Colonel Johnson.
Thank you, Ryan. Based on my 34 years experience in port security in Trinidad and Tobago, the traditional risks like cargo theft and smuggling has evolved. And now we are seeing the smuggling of arms, ammunition, narcotics, and even people through our ports. And most of the time, this would be hidden in legitimate trade flow. And we are also seeing attempts to evade customs and exercise duty through under-invoicing and fraudulent manifesting, sometimes aided by corruption within the supply chain. Now, we are also seeing the new threat of an emerging threat of cyber threat. We at Port of Spain has been incorporating a lot of technology into our systems. We, in our logistics, we are using container management systems and so on. And with these new technologies, of course, it increases our vulnerabilities to cyber threat. A single breach could compromise our whole system. It could it could affect our revenue collection as well as basically shut us down for a period of time. And we need to really get up to speed in terms of technology and how to mitigate those threats.
Terrific. Thank you. Lieutenant Colonel Johnson?
Thanks. So before I begin, I just want to kind of set the scene in terms of the Caribbean region and Jamaica. But first, I just would like to thank FIU for inviting me here. Professor Shirley sends his regards, and certainly he would have preferred to have been here, but he decided to send me instead. But just to kind of give a little background, Jamaica is strategically positioned in the Caribbean. I think that it can be said that we are at the east, west, north, south shipping lanes, and that in itself presents several opportunities and responsibilities and also threats. We manage to do a lot of transshipment from the Americas, from Asia, and down to South America. And so there are several major global shipping lines that pass through Jamaica, to include CMA, CGM. So given Jamaica's strategic position, it certainly puts us in the spotlight to try and see how best we can deal with several of the security challenges that face us. I would like to ditto some of the comments that you would have made, Azim, but for me, I think our greatest threat is the one of transnational crime, which sees a lot of drugs, weapons, and ammunition passing through our shores. Again, Jamaica has an economic exclusive zone of about 200 miles. It's about 200 miles is the size of its country, and so there is a lot of waters to protect. And so you find that a lot of the bad actors tend to use these established shipping routes as part of their transnational activities. Again, because of where we're located in the Caribbean, we're also subject to a lot of natural disasters, and that in itself has in the past shut ports down. And so it is something that we need to ensure that when we look at our infrastructure and our development, that we are properly prepared to deal with these levels of natural disaster. And the last point that I'd want to make in terms of what we see as some of our main threats and challenges is also the insider threat. And again, we would have had a recent visit from CMA CGM because we believe that it is very important that the persons who work on our ports are properly vetted. But even our stakeholders who have a role to play in terms of moving the goods off the ports, if it is that they are not treated well, if it is that they are not happy, then they too can shut down the economy in terms of moving those goods and those containers off the port. 90% of Jamaica's trade is by sea, and on a daily activity in terms of port operations, we are moving over or close to 1,000 containers on and off the port. So if it is that we're not able to handle the cyber threats, if we're not able to manage those transnational crimes that certainly permeate across not just Jamaica but the rest of the Caribbean, if we're not able to work with our stakeholders to ensure that productivity is maintained, then these things can have severe economic impact on the country and the region by extension.
Terrific. I might come back to the point you made about insider threats. It seems like there's a pretty interesting thread there to pull on. I wanted to go to Alex for some opening remarks. So we've had a really nice lay of the land from Lieutenant Colonel Johnson and from Mr. Ali on the Caribbean. Let's zoom out a little bit more globally here and talk about the legacy of the COVID-19 pandemic, where we saw supply chain security come into focus, something that we're all now talking about almost on a daily basis. What kinds of lessons can be learned from other geographies of the world and applied to the Western Hemisphere for confronting these uncertain maritime logistics ecosystems?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for considering CMA-CGM in that event. It's a privilege to be part of it today. It is true that as the second largest shipping company in the world, we are being affected to that new framework of power, where we've seen a lot of crises coming and coming and coming, with a very surprising way of appearing. So the Houthis in the Red Sea, the COVID-19, AI issues, the election of the President Trump and the impact of tariff policy. So many crises had come. I can mention as well the impact on the Ukraine war on the global maritime trade. So for us, the key lesson of that is that chaos is the new normal. We come from an era in which we try to regulate international relations and trade, but we think that it's almost over and we need to adapt to that. That's where security becomes more a kind of resilience for organization. So resilience for us means being able to protect the assets. We have several assets. You know, we are a global carrier, so we have the asset vessel, but we own also terminals in collaboration with the port authorities. We are a logistic company as well, so we are impacted by what happens on the land side. We are an air freight company as well. So we are globally impacted by all that happen in the world. So resilience means protecting those assets with physical security and cyber security measures. But it is also being able to build the proper trusted partnerships with the key players. For example, in the US, we have a very strong relationship with Homeland Security. And it's very important to address sensitive issues like insider threats.
Yeah.
And then we definitely need to be able to create a kind of performance framework for all that. Otherwise, we wouldn't be credible inside our own organization. We need to make that profitable. That's a real big challenge for the next coming years. Great.
You've also mentioned insider threats, so I'm definitely going to come back to this issue now. That's two speakers in a row. Fred, we've gone to the Caribbean. We've had a more macro global perspective. Let's go to the port of Miami, which ranks among the top 10, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of busiest ports in the United States, moving millions of tons of cargo each year. How do you see some of the challenges and risks described here playing out in your context in the Port of Miami?
So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Miami. Welcome to your Port Miami as well. As all of these gentlemen have mentioned, security is most definitely on the top priority of any port of entry into the United States. Just to give a little bit more stats on the Port of Miami, we are ranked number 10th largest port in the U.S. We are the number 1 international container port in the state of Florida. We are the cruise capital of the world, undisputed, moving about 8.23 million passengers a year. And we move about 1.1 million 20-foot equivalent units through our port. So we are a small port. We're only 522 acres. It's a man-made island right in the middle of downtown. So when you talk about security, there's so many threats from the water, from landside, IEDs, active shooters inside of the terminals, of course on the cargo side, on the waterways. And there's a lot of things that, being a home port, such as Port of Miami, we do things that are seen and most definitely unseen. But as mentioned by Lieutenant Colonel, the relationships is what keeps us safe every single day. When we're moving cargo from ship to shore, or hundreds of thousands of passengers, that communication level through Homeland Security, through our oversight of the United States Coast Guard, Customs and Border Protection, and of course our local Sheriff's Department, all of these challenges are real, and we face them every single day. And the only way we can get through it is communication and that network through fusion, through the FBI, through multiple sources of security, because if we don't share it, then there's a possibility of it happening somewhere else. So there's a lot of challenges, and it is real for sure.
I have a question for all of you, because intelligence is so important in securing ports and being able to communicate between different port facilities. And so my question, I think, is about intelligence sharing specifically, because it is such an essential feature in being able to alert one another that there could be something, suspicious cargo, individual route, so on. What are some of the main obstacles to communicating this kind of and sharing this kind of intelligence between you all as you see it? And maybe we'll start with Mr. Ali.
For one, there's no platform for we to share this information on. Transnational crime, they strive on the fragment, how countries and states operate in silos. They strive on that. So having a platform where port authorities, national security, shipping lines, and everybody could share that information, it will be helpful. Now, some of the drawbacks is the element of trust, right? Trust. A lot of agencies, what I find, does not share information unless a level of trust develop over time. So if it's new to the game, you're not going to get the information. They really have to take time to develop that person, know your personality. Of course, they'll do the normal vetting and so on. But that trust and networking, it takes time to develop. And in some entities, when the person who needs to get that information, by the time you develop that trust and confidence to share those information, that person is no longer there. It's retired or move on. So it's a continuous evolving system that we have to really find a way and a mechanism in terms of having a platform to share that. One of the suggestions that came out in somewhere I went recently is that national security agencies should have a liaison, right? Establish a liaison with each of the entities on the port. That way information can be shared going up and down, right? Because port authorities, we just don't have the information, the big picture of what's happening. At the national security level, they may have it, right? And if you have that liaison, establish a liaison system where it embedded into port authorities, it will be helpful in dealing with these issues.
I hope the smart folks in the room took note of the fact that there is no platform for sharing information that exists and is trusted among different agencies. So there's an opportunity out there for the business-minded among you. Lieutenant Colonel Johnson.
So yes, one of the challenges that there's one established platform. The fact of the matter, though, is that when you look across some agencies, some organizations, there are platforms there. So, for example, the UNODC WCO organization has a platform that they share information about the movement of cargo and containers. You find that some countries, some ports have what is called a port community system, where information about cargo movement between the customs entity and the port entity in terms of their terminal operating systems, that information is there, and that system allows a custom broker or somebody to come in and collect a container. I think the challenge is the integration of these systems. And I think that is where Azim was going in terms of trying to identify or try to bring together these various silos of information into one area where you can get a more wholesome picture of the type of cargo and movements and all of that. So I think that is one of the challenge. The other challenge that I see is really formalizing MOUs between international organizations. Again, I said that UNODC, the WCO would have a platform. The OS may have another platform, but that formalization and trying to ensure that there's this cross-pollination of information.
They're not speaking to one another.
Sorry?
They're not speaking to one another.
Right, they are not speaking to one another. But there are best practices in various locations that could be looked at and improved on. And so if we're able to pull the information from the port security system, look at the other intelligence arms around the various regions, Southcom, look at Department of Homeland Security, even sharing the information between the various ports. Those are things that we need to look at in terms of closing those gaps. And we'll be able to get a more, as I said, fulsome information picture in terms of the movement of containers, cargoes, and goods.
Terrific. Alex?
Yeah, so intelligence is definitely a key topic for sure. But the problem with intelligence is what do you want to share with whom and what for?
Yeah.
So that's why we first need, as a private company, we strongly believe in private-public partnership, obviously. But for that, we need to define very specific frameworks. That's why we set up MOUs with a lot of law enforcement agencies, starting with the US, obviously, European agencies, and some local agencies, like, for example, the Colombian Navy, Jamaican Constabulary Force, and so on. That's key, because that's where we can define what we are talking about when it's about sharing. Then we have specific teams to deal with that. And I insist on that because when you talk about intelligence, since it's a very sensitive topic in terms of impact on the ground, you need to be able to talk the same language with your counterpart. You need to be able to build that trust in the relationship. And it doesn't come from one day to another. You need to build cases for that. So that's key. That's why our chairman chose to only have former law enforcement background people within the security department. And I strongly believe it is key. And then the third aspect is to be able to set up task forces with those key partners on the ground. So we have several examples on that. And again, I think it will be your interest. We're working a lot on insider threats.
Fred?
So I think all the gentlemen hit it right on the head. Port Miami, we are very similar to a lot of the U.S. seaports here in the nation, and we have sister seaport agreements. 50% of Port Miami's trade is with our North-South, Caribbean, South America, and we have MOUs and sister seaport agreements with not only certain countries but certain seaports, and we've been doing a lot of commercial feedback, but more specifically, public safety, safety and security. A lot of these ports and countries come to Port Miami and vice versa. We share a lot of information. A wise man once said, he was one of our former directors of security, that commercially we can have a lot of competition, and the competition is real, but there is no competition for safety and security. Right. And the quicker we realize that we can share information, that we can gather information together to mitigate as quickly as possible, that is our intent. And for Port Miami, some of those MOUs and sister seaport agreements that we are entangled with now, they come and visit us for not 1 day, not 2 days, up to 3 days, where we come in, do a full briefing with our federal partners, with our public safety team members, and then they do tours not only in our container terminals, but in our passenger terminals as well for best practices. And that communication is key for success and safety. We have multi-agency mass flows that we continue to drill on our seaport, because when an incident comes and the time comes for a response, you don't want to now meet the person you're supposed to end up communicating with during that incident. And I'll give you just a quick example as far as our public safety aspect. Our North Channel, our cruise row on our north side, that is a designated airfield. So seaplanes literally land on our North Channel. Last year, I believe it was in February, we had 5 mega cruise vessels alongside, and during their daily call of 9 hours when they're embarking and debarking passengers, a seaplane with 7 passengers, to include the pilot, was landing or attempting to land in our North Channel on the waterway. One of their pontoons failed and the seaplane crashed. The response was so quick. We had not only Marine Fire, which is housed on the port, we had our Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office, which is housed on the port as well, Sector Miami, which is across the channel. They all responded and had not only all 7 passengers lives saved, but that seaplane towed to a safe harbor within an hour and a half. So we could not do it without doing drills, making that communication ahead of an incident, and it is proven, it works.
Let's go to this issue of insider threats, because it's been mentioned multiple times now by multiple panelists. So maybe I'll start with you, Fred, and just go in reverse order
Sure.
down the line. So give our audience a better sense of what an insider threat is, what you're looking for, why they're so dangerous. This is a burgeoning field, at least as far as I understand it, on the private sector side, right? Increasing number of folks trying to assist in the identification and the neutralization of insider threats. But give us some more details as you can to give the audience a sense of what you're looking for and why this is so dangerous.
So insider threats, this is very specific, and sometimes it's more dangerous because they know so much about your organization. They know so much about your inner dealings, your workings, your weaknesses, in your infrastructure. And as far as the port and the cargo, we are a landlord port. Our federal agencies and our federal partners, they do the majority of the inspections. And 9 times out of 10, the majority of those inspections are very targeted. They're very specific because of that insider threat, where they ended up getting that information from some insider that they've already caught, 2 months ago, and they ended up giving up a bigger fish. It is so specific that those targets are precise for sure. And another piece that one of you all mentioned was the auditing purposes as well. So the insiders, as far as the financial piece and the billing aspect of it, when you know the system of our bills and how we bill, that can be manipulated as well through the inside. So it is a threat all the way around for sure.
They run the gamut.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Alex?
Yeah, so again, for us, for the chairman of the group, the commitment is to be part of securing the global supply chain. So being able to secure our terminals and our vessel is key. The key issue is definitely related to the security within the terminal operation, because it's the door, the entry door within a country. So insiders for us has a double impact. The first one is related to the direct impact of illicit traffics for the security of our staff in terms of threats and violence. Right. You know that in some countries, insiders is not only about finding information about a specific container to be contaminated, but it can be related to murder a security manager. So it's a really sensitive issue for the security of our staff. And the second kind of issue is related to our reputation with the authorities in the destination countries. So reputation there, it's being fined. It's losing the city path. It's having a vessel seized by the Chinese authority. So it's really a big topic we're working on.
Terrific. Lieutenant Johnson?
I'll start by giving a scenario that actually took place on one of my ports. We had a container come into the country, and in that container, it had furniture and high-end liquor. And you know, Caribbean people love their rooms, right? And it was placed in a secured space, and that container was moved off the port. The high-end liquor was removed, and the container was returned to the port. And that could not have happened without collusion taking place between several stakeholders. I mean, in order to move a container off the port, and I'm not pointing any fingers, but just giving you an idea of the various touch points that, or the various entities that would be involved in moving a container off a port. A customs official would have to provide some release. Maybe the surveillance cameras would have to turn a blind eye. The scanning systems that these containers go through would have to either have scanned or not scanned because those scanned images are secured. And the gates would have to have been told to release the cargo. And the same, and the reverse would have to happen for that container to come back onto the port. So that just gives, and that is just one scenario in the Caribbean. We have had instances across other ports across the world where containers come and go for various reasons, drugs, weapons, and all of that. So that insider threat is real. And for Jamaica, it is a serious problem because we are challenged with a lot of gun crimes in Jamaica. And Jamaica does not manufacture guns. And unfortunately, most of the weapons come from right here. And, you know, I mean, there's not a lot of scanning that takes place from the ports that these containers leave from. And there's scanning that takes place on the ports of Kingston when they come here, when they get there, sorry. So there has to be some level of collusion that takes place in order for containers and drugs and ammunition to come and leave our ports. A couple of things that we have been doing in order to stymie that. One port in particular has a very good program that is called the Human Reliability Program. And that program basically provides for background checks to be done on the persons who work on the port. As the regulator, the Port Authority, we provide what is called a National Port Identification Card, which is similar to the TWIC card here in the United States. And one of the steps that we have been doing in recent times is to make that system even more robust. So there are some best practices here where anybody who owns a TWIC card, there's a continuous vetting process that takes place. And so that is something that we are looking to mirror in Jamaica to ensure that there's a continuous vetting process that takes place for everybody who needs to have access on the port. But there are also some specific persons that has a very, it's a high turnover rate. A lot of the truck drivers, a couple of the stevedores and the crane operators. And for those persons, the intent is to really engage a more robust type of screening to ensure that we are mitigating any form of collusion or partnership that would take place. So that's just what some of the things that we are doing to try and stymie that insider threat. But it is something that is real, and given the transnational crime, the transnational criminal organizations, they will try to find the weakest link. And if we're able to identify those early, then we're able to prevent, mitigate.
That's terrific. Mr. Ali?
Well, similarly to the Jamaica experience, we had that same experience. But in our case, was tobacco, cigarettes. They carry a lot of duty, a lot of taxes. And the persons involved in corruption along the chain and inside a threat found a nice way, an easy way, in which to get it in the markets of Trinidad and Tobago without paying customs duties and taxes. Port of Spain is a transshipment point for containers going into Suriname. So the ultimate consignee is a company in Suriname. It just have to land in Port of Spain. And due to insider corruption and the inside threat, these containers somehow were removed from the port facility, went out, and came back in, and then transshipped to Suriname. Right? When things didn't go the way they're supposed to go, persons were killed. That's how serious it is. In Trinidad, we have at least 1,600 port employees. And when you add haulers, truck drivers, shipping agents, customs clerk, brokers, the list goes. While we have a robust system ensuring that access is only granted to a person who we want in, you have to do criminal background checks, fingerprints, and so on. The influence of money beats all checks. Right? So it's quite difficult. Yeah. Now we have solved that issue. We invested a lot in technology. We basically put cameras everywhere, CCTV. So if it happens, we know the people who are involved. We go through a disciplinary process, if not criminally, and we get them out. Right? Since we adopted that approach, we haven't lost a container probably in the last 3.5 years. Okay. But you always have to be one step ahead. The same way could be a container of cigarettes, a container of alcohol. It could be a container with something else that poses a national security threat to your country. So, in my view, ports in the Caribbean, that is the Caribbean small island state where we have a problem with illegal arms and ammunition, right, is to weed out corruption and that insider threat on our ports.
If I may just add one additional point, and I don't want us to miss it, is that even these insider threats, there are linkages to the criminal organizations, gangs. In South America, the gangs are. So there's that connection that is there that helps to fuel it. And it is a point that we cannot overlook. And even when we look to put in systems to mitigate that, we have to be looking at not just our national intelligence bases, but looking at the regional and the international assistance and relationships that we can use to certainly cauterize or mitigate.
All of you have sort of given me a segue into my next question, which was about the security of the containers themselves, right? The goods that we're talking about come in the containers, right? And it's an astounding figure. There's something like only 2% of containers are actually scanned worldwide for their contents. And criminal organizations have gotten very good at finding the containers, in particular, that have perishable goods many times, right? That have to be moved through quickly, lest they lose their content and not be able to be brought to market. We're talking about things like cut flowers. We're talking about things like bananas, other produce that could be perishable very quickly. And so I wanted to ask you a question about the technology and how we can balance as well efficiency with the need for security, because the containers, as you all have mentioned, sometimes have things they're not supposed to have, weapons, ammunition, and so on. Maybe start with you, Mr. Ali, and then we can
Well,
back down the row.
2% is not very much in the
No.
scheme of things. But they had a balance efficiency with because a port goods move, it's commerce, right? So, well, just to add, at Port of Spain we actually do 27%,
27. Okay.
20%, 27%. And we intend to increase it because we recently acquired some non-intrusive scanners. We bought it, and it's the customs is using it now. So we'll increase that value. But the actual targeting of containers is where technology and AI can come in to pinpoint based on shipper profile, commodity profile, to assist with what is actually selected to be scanned. Perishable has always been a problem and an issue, but with the electronic, the inspection system, the non-intrusive inspection scanners, yes, it will expedite the process, right? The rate can be increased, right? And this will surely help.
Yeah, I think it is always a challenge, balancing security with productivity. Again, the Jamaican experience is that the turn time on the ports is very important for the trucker. Unfortunately, in Jamaica, the trucker is paid by the trip. He's not paid by the hour. If he was paid by the hour, he'd be a millionaire because of how long sometimes it takes to do one turn. And what we mean by a turn is the throughput for one trucker from he gets to the in gate until he exits. And that in itself is a process. Scanning across the world, as I have said, is 2%. And that poses a problem for us, again, because of the high illegal trade activities that take place, especially throughout the Caribbean. We know about the drug routes coming up from South America up to Jamaica, and then Jamaica is a transshipment point that then moves those drugs to North America, Europe, and then in return, the weapons and ammunition come through and all of that. So it is always a challenge for us in terms of managing that productivity, in terms of also dwell time with vessels and all of that. Now, for Jamaica, I'm going to tell you that we do 100% scanning of all cargo that comes into the country. And we have to do that for a reason. And I'll probably hasten to say that sometimes the cargo is scanned twice. So the cargo is scanned when it is leaving the port, and if it is less than a container load and it goes to the warehouse, it is scanned again. So we have invested in mobile, non-intrusive inspection systems that will inspect the cargo going out, and we have invested in pallet scanning systems that will inspect the break bulk. The challenge, as we have said now, is trying to see how we can manage all this screening and scanning activity and improve or increase productivity. And so what we have been doing is that we have been looking at a number of things, and there are two that I'll speak about. One is risk-based management and trying to assess, assimilate, determine the type of cargo that is coming in, and we try to get people to become what you call best practice entities, so they may be exempt certain things. And then the other thing that we're doing is leveraging technology where the scanning is concerned, along with artificial intelligence. And so for our pallet scanners and for our mobile scanners that we have recently procured, there's a software that you can put on the system that will help to quickly identify contraband. But we also are looking to do what is called remote adjudication. And so that process of assessing whether there is something illegal or something that requires referral inside that container is not done there, but it is done away from the location. And those images are stored so you can always revisit them. And with those two initiatives, along with what I should add, integrating that in the port community system will allow for hopefully a faster turn time of truckers moving through the port. But these are things are work in progress and we improve every day. But certainly risk-based and remote adjudication using artificial intelligence are some of the initiatives that we're looking at to improve our turn time on the port. So.
Terrific. Before I go to Alex, I just want to say to the audience, this will be the last round of questions from me. So if you have a question, you can queue up at one of the mics, and I will go to questions from the audience right after the gentleman up here are finished.
So just maybe a few compliments about what have been said. So for example, we are building a port in the middle of Gulf of Urabá in Colombia, which is the best place to be in terms of trafficking. So it will call Puerto Antioquia, and it's the same. We are trying to set up a system in which we will scan 100% of export containers, but what about transshipment activities? Right. How do we deal with that? So it's all about collaborating with the authorities for targeting the specific container. And we come back to the previous topic. But then we will impact the efficiency, the performance of the terminal. So that was your point. Yeah. So for us, we conducted a kind of exercise in which we tried to merge security with operations. And where we did that, it had very good results. In some terminals where operations and security are held by the same department, we can see that security can contribute between 15 to 25% of the performance of the terminal, which is huge. Yeah. What does it mean? It means that security is not anymore considered as an expense. It becomes a contributor for a return on investment. Mm-hmm. So the next year, you will invest on security because it brings performance to the terminal. That's the key.
That's really interesting. Fred?
So I think Alex hit it right on the head. At Port Miami, we have that combined OPSEC operation happening at the port. But as far as scanning goes, and the necessity, it is needed. We can't avoid it. But as far as productivity, we try to make it up on the ship-to-shore move, and of course, after the containers are landed or the cargo is landed. There's a lot of intrusive and non-intrusive mitigations that the feds and Homeland Security, Customs and Border Protection, Agriculture, U.S. Ag, they are boots on the ground. They are running X-ray machines to see what's inside the boxes. The percentage is much higher than 2%, at least specifically on the Port of Miami. But I could assure you, when there is a suspect box or container or cargo, there's a specific dry warehouse on the Port of Miami. They call it the House of Pain. And the House of Pain, any suspect container that's going in there, it's either going to get cut in half, it's going to get opened up, it's going to get broken down, and smugglers, drugs, money, they have been getting very original in what they do. The game hasn't changed over the years. It's just gotten either more frequent. They have cyclical patterns to it, but they have a specific museum inside of the House of Pain where you have a 50-foot vessel or a yacht cut right in half. They have secret compartments everywhere. There's, in the perishables, there's artificial fruit, plastic fruit that are cut in half. There's diesel engines that are specific, and they're mounted in their museum to show you how original these smugglers are getting. But I can give everyone the assurance for a port of entry into the United States, 100% of the containerized cargo gets X-rayed and inspected for nuclear weapons or dirty bombs. So whether it's coming in any port in the U.S., radiation porthole monitors are being scanned for our containers for the safety of the city as well.
All right, thank you very much. So that 2% number was a global number. It's
global.
Not a particular number. It sounds we're doing much better here in the Americas, which is a really good sign. And Fred has just made an excellent advert as well for the museum at the House of Pain. Come up and see them afterwards
right.
if you want to
Well,
go and,
let's go.
and see,
We'll pop open the avocado.
see the good stuff there. I see a couple folks queuing at the mics. I'm going to start over here with the gentleman over here. Name and affiliation, and just make sure that your intervention ends with a question. If you
Sure.
Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Armando, master student, cybersecurity and tech policy here at FIU. The question is, how do natural disasters and climate change impact your port security strategies, especially in regions like the Caribbean? Thank you.
It's a good question. We didn't get into
Well,
this in our discussion. I
yeah.
think it probably makes the most sense to start with you two gentlemen. Down.
So, yeah, as I indicated earlier, natural disasters is one of our major threat or concern. Certainly, what we have been doing is that as we look at our port infrastructure and our port development, we try to build in such a way that we can withstand the Category 5 hurricanes. But outside of that, we're also looking at how we respond before and after a hurricane. Business continuity is very important. And so I think the most recent experience was Hurricane Beryl. When it had threatened our shores, we were able to get those ports back up within hours of the hurricane passing. And that has only come about from pain, learning, and improving from those experiences. So certainly the Port Authority, whenever it is looking to either collaborate or partner in terms of port infrastructure, port construction, those are some of the main things that we bear in mind, and we build to that. But we also look at what is important, what is essential in terms of how quick we can recover and the necessary systems and mechanisms that we need to put in place where that is concerned. So we have a very robust national response plan that is managed by our ODPEM, Office of Disaster and Emergency Planning, and I think that we have become very good at it now, so much so that we have been able to respond and assist other Caribbean countries in terms of their recovery whenever they are hit by a natural disaster. And in a former life when I served in the military, Jamaica was one of the countries that were the first boots on the ground in a number of instances, assisting our sister countries in terms of response. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah. Anything to add to that, Mr. Ali?
Well, similarly, the Trinidad and Tobago experience is the same. We are more southern in Caribbean, so we haven't gotten a hurricane in a long time. But same sort of framework as explained by Mr. Johnson here. But what we do, we in addition to that, we do a lot of drills, tabletop drills, and we practice for the scenario, both pre and post, right? And for business continuity. If for any reason our port is shut down, because our port runs 24/7, basically the country shuts down. Right? So if our port is down through a natural or man-made disaster, our country would have it would be very, very challenged. The port is one of the economic drivers for our commerce. And so we practice drills and exercises to ensure that if it do happen, we are better prepared to respond as efficiently as possible and get it back up and running in the shortest space of time.
I'd just like to add that on the regional level as well, there's CARICOM, there's IMPACTS, there's RSS. So there are a number of Caribbean response agencies and entities that are activated once there's a threat of a natural disaster in a specific region. And so Jamaica is responsible for the northern side of the Caribbean, and I think Trinidad is for the southern side, and Barbados also plays a critical role. So there's that connection in terms of interagency assistance at within the Caribbean region.
Excellent. Ma'am?
Hi, my name's Sarah Whalen, and I'm from the University of Miami School of Law, doing an SJD in terrorism. And I know it's not specifically a commercial question, but ports figure, often very dramatically in terrorist incidents through all kinds of things, like the Achille Laura, weapons were put on during a port stop. There are a lot of security issues. But one thing that struck me also in the previous talk about port security was you have China, who now is controlling all the shipping coming out of Freeport in the Bahamas. It's 50 miles from the United States. And China is also now running the Panama Canal. It's a fact. So, and it used to be that the United States ran these ports, and the complaint in Latin America for years was that, the United States was a big power, an evil hegemon. What makes China a better hegemon than the United States? And is there any step that the United States might take to rectify this situation in the Caribbean? Thank you.
So why don't we, there's a lot of pieces to that question. Why don't we bracket some of them since we're short on time and maybe talk about, let's say, foreign ownership of ports, more broadly. Like, does that, how does that present a challenge from a U.S. perspective, Fred?
Yeah, so, going through foreign ownership, Port Miami, we had to go through our due diligence, right? And I think all of the, ports and, in the Caribbean, in the U.S., must do their due diligence to see who owns what companies, right? And during our initial contract negotiations or even our contract amendments, we go through extenuous due diligence, not only through our seaport, but through our Miami-Dade County agencies to properly vet companies that are approaching the port for either a leasehold, an extension of lease. So I think it is important for ports and ports authorities to do their due diligence to see who owns what, for sure.
Foreign ownership is a very sensitive topic.
Yes.
So as CMA CGM, we have two terminal activities. One is CMA Terminal, which is 100% French capital, and a second one, which is Terminal Link, which is 50 China Merchant and 50 CMA Terminal. So a lot of terminals in the US have been owned by that entity, which is Terminal Link. For example, Houston was half French capital and half Chinese capital. Yeah. So obviously, with taking into account the evolution of the global situation, the decision was made to buy, wherever it's possible, all the Chinese capital, to put only 100% of French capital, because we don't want to be exposed to future regulation of the maritime industry by the US, by the European Union, that would be too expensive. And then, in that question of the global hegemony between Chinese and the US, which we are all exposed to, you've seen that our chairman a few weeks ago has announced an investment plan of $20 billion plus within the US. That's a way to show where is the priority for the group. Where is the priority for the best interest of the group? It is true that Chinese are present everywhere in the shipping industry. They build most of the ships, but we've been the first company to buy a ship from an Indian shipyard. So definitely you need to make a choice. And just a final comment about the Chinese controlling the Panama Canal. I wouldn't be that sure about that, I'm not sure that the Chinese are really controlling the Panama Canal at all.
To put in a shameful plug, we've done a lot of work on this at CSIS, and you can have a look at some of the pieces that we've put out about Hutchison and some of the ports at the strategic approaches that are of the concern. I'm going to give the gentleman at the microphone over there the last question of our session.
Hello, good afternoon to the stage and everyone. My name is Alonso Villarreal. I have exactly a question for Mr. Wong. It's about, you know, the problem we have exactly with the drugs and with guns and everything's coming to United States, and that is stopped, and they have more control. But what United States and the Port Authority of Miami is doing about to going the guns and all the arms from here, even to Mexico, even to Dominican Republics, and you know, at the end, all these guns and arms is going exactly to Haiti. We continue with this war and problems they have all the time. Exactly what you are doing, like authority, because it's going to be practically for me, is the same for New York, New York, etc. It's going to be the same. What exactly United States doing to avoid this problem, because the guns is coming from here and it's going there to our countries next, and they have a lot of problem with that. Thank you.
On the outbound side.
Thank you for your question. And you know, specifically on how certain imports and exports are targeted, that is through our federal government and Homeland Security. So that's a specific question for them. I wish I can give you that answer, but I assure you they are, you know, targeting certain imports and exports specifically for that.
Great. We've just scratched the surface, but our hour is up, so unfortunately we need to bring this session to a close, but there's a lot more that can be discussed on ports. Hopefully we planted an interest in that. But before we leave the stage, I'd like to ask you to give us a warm round of applause for our beautiful panel up here. To my left, Fred Wong, Alexandre Mouil, Lieutenant Colonel Kirk Johnson, and Mr. Azim Ali. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Great job.
Great.
Great job. All right.